The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but women rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
Alright.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat above us. There will be entrance. Prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's great to have you along for the ride on this Friday, March 17th, Saturday, March 18th. If you're on the East Coast, I hope you had a great and green St. Patrick's Day today. Hey, we are live right here, right now, in Uncle Jimbo's cabin in the Great White North as we are live 7 days a week. Let's welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key in Noonan, Georgia, at spacedoutradio.com, on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on Revolution Radio. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL is the man behind our music. Yes, the legendary guitar god rocks us in and out of every single show right here on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, if you're a social media junkie like I am, check us out on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and on Stitcher. And, of course, our website is SpacedOutRadio.com. And if you head over to Patreon.com, you can become a Spaced Out Radio patron today for as low as $1 a month, because we want to offer you some really cool and great swag. If you want to take part in this show, I want to remind you, we do not take phone calls. However, if you're in one of the chat rooms, I'd love to take your questions in there. You can follow us at spacedoutradio.com. If you're listening on our website, we have a chat room right there, on Revolution Radio, on Spreaker, on the UPRN chat room, or on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. You can also go to hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. For $5 a month, if you head to our website, we do have the SOR Space Travelers Club going. We have some great swag to give away each and every month. We have a brand new news section called The Encounter Online, dealing with everything paranormal, put up by our editors Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. You can check out my latest blog there as well. And if you've had a sighting that you can't explain or an experience that just leaves you scratching your head, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our researcher, Mike Schmidt, is ready to find out what's going on. We want to welcome in our terrestrial radio stations at this time. WQEE 99 Rock the Key, way down in Noonan, Georgia. We're also live in New Orleans on 107.7 FM on the United Public Radio Network and over 160 countries around the world. And we're on Revolution Radio. Remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Whenever we talk conspiracy, one way or another, it always leads to one of three topics: either 9/11, JFK, or aliens. Tonight we're talking about the latter as we delve into some of the secrets NASA holds about space. For decades, there have been rumors about what they're holding back, from the secret space program to videos from the International Space Station that just so happens to lose its feed when UFOs go flying by. There's always a story that involves NASA. And for good reason, because let's face it, we, as a public, don't know what they found or what they haven't. We have no idea why they stopped going to the moon and instead focus on the shuttle program, which did its work about 300 to 400 miles above Earth. We have heard the stories, though, each launch being watched by some UFO. Or how about this one? Neil Armstrong allegedly saying when walking on the moon on an emergency channel, "They are here, they are on the hill, and they are watching us." Ken Johnston is a man who knows NASA. He's a retired Marine and former NASA aeronautical pilot. He worked for NASA during the Apollo missions. Now, some have gone as far as calling him a whistleblower. He doesn't think that way. But the secrets Ken knows about the program and what's really going on firsthand is incredible information from someone who was once on the inside of one of the most secretive programs right in front of the public eye. Joining me tonight as a co-host is from the SOR The Encounter Online, Eric Markham. And we bring in Ken Johnston to Spaced Out Radio for the first time. Ken, thank you so much for being with us. How are you?
I'm doing just great, Dave, and I really appreciate you having me on your program.
Well, you know what? It is going to be a great program tonight because I got to tell you, Ken, I have been waiting 2 years to get you on. When I first learned about you, because I was kind of thrust into everything, I was like, man, if I could get this guy on, this would be incredible. And lo and behold, you're here now. And I got to say, thank you so much.
What took you so long?
Oh, blame me. Sure, blame me.
Absolutely.
That's okay. How you been, my friend?
Oh, I've been a little rugged, actually. Spent a whole month over in India, back and forth, and it's kind of tough there. I hope tonight when we talk a little bit, I can dispel some of the statements you just made, because it kind of leads a little clouds the shadows a little bit on what my titles were, what my functions were, et cetera. And so maybe we can get into a little of my history, and we get in that in the process. I'll set everybody correctly straight on exactly what I was involved in, what I did, and what I know.
Absolutely. And we bring in our resident Encounter Online journalist, Eric Markham. Eric, how are you tonight?
Doing fine, Dave. Glad to be here.
Going to get you to move a little bit back from your microphone, my friend. You're a little loud.
Okay.
But that's good.
That was great. I could understand him better that way.
And the reason why I brought Eric in on this conversation, Ken, is not only was he the one who booked you for the show, but he's our resident scientist around here too. And, you know, the one thing I like about Eric being on these big-time shows like this one is tonight is because, you know, he understands that whole scientific realm when it comes to the paranormal as well. And I consider anything conspiratorial still falling under the paranormal umbrella as well. Do you consider yourself a paranormal researcher, Ken?
Not really. Throughout my life, I've bounced in and out, being exposed to a little bit more and more paranormal and different events and things that have taken place in my life, most of which I've kept absolutely, totally quiet because of maintaining my credibility. But as of this last UFO Congress in Scottsdale, I underwent hypnosis and regression to get back in and check on a few events and things that I had questioned in my life, and maybe I might be getting a little more interested in the paranormal.
It is a fun subject, but before we go any further, I would love our audience to learn about you, because you're a retired Marine. You worked for NASA for a number of years. You probably saw things, heard things, listened to the stories from good friends and coworkers that absolutely would blow anyone's mind up, especially those who don't believe. When you look back on your life, can you believe what you've learned comparatively to what other humans on this planet walk around not believing?
Well, and in retrospect, looking back, sort of makes you realize that, you know, you didn't do all of this stuff yourself, because you look back and say, my gosh, would I have planned this process of my life? And I want to clear up one thing. I did not retire from the Marine Corps. I was in the Marine Corps for a little over 4 years, and there's a little history there. Yeah, you got time, and I'll bounce a little bit back and bring everybody forward.
You go for it.
Okay. Actually, I left a little town named Hart, Texas, of only a population of 560 back in 1957, and went to the Oklahoma Military Academy, which was the West Point of the Southwest, where I graduated from high school and was in junior college when doing some summer work at Oklahoma City University, when my best buddy, Jack Lancaster, came in the dorm and says, well, kid, I've joined the Marine Corps. And my brilliance, I said, the hell you say, I'm joining with you. So the next day, we went from being captains in advanced ROTC at OMA to Marine Corps buck privates in San Diego, California. That kind of gives you an idea of, you know, spur-of-the-moment, brilliant decisions that we make. But in retrospect, those were actually worthwhile, because while we were in the Marine Corps, we went off to avionics electronic training in Memphis, Tennessee, came out in the top 10 of my class, got selected to go to El Toro by Santa Ana, California. And there, the commanding officer of the MFA 542, which was one of the first Marine squadrons to get the F-4 Phantom, and that's where I got a chance to taste going a little faster than twice the speed of sound on that, checking out some of the avionics. Then the commander says, why don't you apply for officer pilot training? And, of course, that was the dream of my life. My father was a pilot in World War II, lost his life and for our country. And I grew up looking at pictures of my dad in the uniform and as a pilot, and I always dreamed of becoming, you know, like my dad and being a pilot. So when the commander suggested that to me, I filled out all the applications and things, and sure enough, I was accepted. I went to Pensacola, Florida, which is the Navy Navy Marine Corps Flight Training Center. And after, I guess it was like 8 months, we finished up basic training, and I came in the top of my class there, was battalion commander, and we went into start flying jets. And this was right at the peak of the Marines' involvement in the Vietnam War. The Marine Corps commander-in-chief of the Marines, commanding officer, said, we're going to cancel all jet flying for Marines. We need helicopter pilots in Vietnam. Well, and now this is something interesting, because I've been attacked verbally by a debunker from NASA and the government, CIA, and some of the other things, claiming, he was kicked out of the flight training, which is a bunch of boulder dash. What they always have is what they call a DOR, drop at your own request. Well, I was refusing to fly jets, and at the time I had only 10 months to go in my service, and so I committed what they call a drop at your own request, went back to El Toro, finished up my time, and right about the time I was finishing is when NASA was beefing up, and the companies were beefing up to go to the moon, to follow Kennedy's direction. My brother, Dr. A.R. Johnston, worked for NASA directly and helped design and build the CESL, that Space Environmental Simulation Laboratory, which has the largest vacuum chamber in the world, and then the second largest, which was Chamber B. Anyway, he said, get down here, because they're looking for people like you that have flying experience and electronics experience. Well, that's exactly what I did. I took my new family, and we drove to Houston, Texas. I went out and applied for 5 different major companies, Lockheed and Martin Marietta, and who joined and become one company now, Grumman, TRW, and I got offers for employment from every one of them, making a whole lot more than I made when I was in the Marine Corps. But I wanted to fly, and I wanted to be part of the test team, so I went with Grumman. And Grumman picked out 4 of us to become what were known as the Civilian Astronaut Consultant Pilots. Now, we're not test pilots, because we didn't go through the military's test pilot training, but we were well trained in all the testing of all the systems of the lunar module. And once it was in the vacuum chambers there in Houston, there had to be one of us 4 in the lunar spacecraft, lunar module. That particular one was named LTA-8, Lunar Test Article Number 8. Anytime one of the regular NASA astronauts came in and wanted to be involved in the testing and checking out of the spacecraft, there had to be one of us test pilots in there to, there I used the term myself, I was one of the civilian astronaut consultant pilots to be there to help train the regular astronauts. So that just those phrases there have been twisted, and journalists have changed, and I even had one person said that I was the director of NASA at the Johnston Space Center. So don't believe anything you read and only half of what you hear nowadays. I think that put me up to the point where once we landed on the moon with Apollo 11, Grumman laid off right at 30,000 employees nationwide, and I was given 2 weeks of severance pay and 2 weeks to find another position while I was being paid. And I went over to the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, LRL, and was hired immediately. And I picked up Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins. Well, they were still in quarantine, so I didn't miss a beat on the Apollo program. And while at the LRL, I became the director of the Data and Photo Control Department, which meant that I had access to the original pictures made from the original negatives and the original films made from the cameras of each one of the missions. And one of the other duties I had was to help write the lunar sample information catalogs. And I did that for the Apollo 12 and 14 and 15. Those are the only ones that I was actually helped with my staff to write what the scientists were writing about all the lunar samples. So that kind of brings you up to date to what happened in the Apollo program. And we can talk a little bit more later about some of the other activities that brought me on over into releasing what people have referred to as Ken Johnston's archive. Now, when I said I had access to all of the original pictures and negatives and slides and that 70-millimeter positive transparencies, as well as the videos, whenever one of the scientists around the world would come to NASA to pick up one of their lunar samples, they would want to have pictures made from orbit of the area where their lunar sample came from, as well as pictures on the lunar surface by the astronauts before they picked the sample up. And that had a lot to do with knowing the orientation of their sample so they could determine at what angle solar radiation impacted their sample. So it was, quite technical what I was involved in. So each time I maintain a set of 5 complete sets of each mission in filing cabinets in my data and photo control office. And whenever one of the astronauts would come, not astronauts, one of the scientists would come in, I'd pull out pictures and then I'd replace them. Well, long about the end of Apollo 15, going in 16, my supervisor, Mr. Pudlascala, came in and said, Ken, we need you to get rid of all those extra pictures. We don't need them anymore. Well, what do you mean? I mean, we've got, we have universities that have science departments that would love to have a set of these pictures. He said, no, just get rid of them. I want you to just dump them in the dumpster. And I argued with him a little bit. And finally, he said, I don't care what you do, just get rid of them. And that was all I needed to hear, because I took that as a tacit approval of any way I wanted to get rid of them. So what I did is I took 3 sets, complete sets, went out the back of the LRL and dumped them in the Dempsey dumpster, which, by the way, just last year I discovered a friend who's become a friend, that she had discovered the pictures dumped in the dumpster and had saved a whole bunch of them herself. So that kind of proved that they had been put there. At any rate, so I put 3 of them in the dumpster. I took one whole set. I gave it to my alma mater in Oklahoma City University, where I hold a Bachelor of Aerospace Test Engineering there. And then, let's see, I had one that I maintain as the control set there at the Data and Photo Control office I had. And the other one, because each time I would order a set for one of the scientists, I'd go ahead and order an extra one, and I was just keeping it for historical purposes in my own little file. And after things started looking, some strange things had happened, I decided I'd just keep those for myself whenever we got laid off from the LRL. So 40-some-odd years later, it came time, and since NASA hadn't come clean about all the things we had discovered and found on the moon, that I needed to make it available to the world, so that if something were to happen to me, it just wouldn't go down in the dirt with me. That kind of brings you up to date a little bit of where we are now. Still a lot more to go.
When you started with NASA, what year would that have been? And when they all of a sudden started pushing you towards the Apollo program, what kind of pride did you feel in being part of this dream that just a few years previous, JFK, before his assassination, had said, we're going to the moon and we're going to get there no matter what? Not quoting him, but paraphrasing him.
Right. Well, it was 1966 when I got out of the Marine Corps and went to work at the Johnston Space Center in Houston with Grumman, and we were the contractors, subcontractors to NASA to build, test, and make the lunar modules available for each one of the Apollo missions. And yes, I was extremely excited about it, because as a little kid growing up, I guess we got my brother and I. My brother AR wanted to become one of the astronauts, but he was never able to get in there. I think it was probably because of his eyesight. And but as a scientist himself, he lived his dream there. And what he said, every time one of the astronauts stepped foot on the moon, he felt like he was there too. And I can vouch for that myself. So when I got there and I started working in 1966, October, as I recall, all the way up until after Apollo 11, when we got laid off, I wasn't specifically I was still with the Apollo program, but I was over at the LRL. And then after that, let's see, I went over to Brown Northrop at the LRL, and then on over to TRW. Then I took a little hiatus of about 2 years and went to work for myself with Real Estate Transamerica Corporation. And then they were looking for astronauts again. Right after the Apollo 11, and we finished up the Apollo 17 flight, NASA started looking for new astronauts for the Skylab and the shuttle program. And that was my opportunity, because I had everything they were looking for. I was a single-engine, multi-engine, instrument-rated flight instructor with the FAA, so I had several thousand hours there. And then I had 2 more degrees. So it was, it looked like I was a shoo, and I have letters of recommendation from Neil Armstrong and Joe Merwin and Jack Schweikert and several of the others. So whenever I applied, it was kind of a shoo-in, we thought. And astronaut Vance Brandt was put in charge of the astronaut selection program for the next group. And I was in the same building 3 as the astronauts were, but I was on the 2nd floor, and they were on the 3rd floor. Vance called me into his office, and he says, come in, Ken, sit down. And I was really excited because I knew the next week they were going to make the announcement of those of us that were being selected to be the next group of astronauts. At any rate, Vance looked at me and he says, I don't know how to tell you this, because he says, we know you can do the job. You've been doing it the same as we have. He says, but the government's gotten involved. Any of your listeners know what happens when the government gets involved in something? Trust me, they'll mess it up. So what happened was, he says, they don't want to have jet jocks. They want to have PhD scientists, and you only have 3 bachelor's degrees. So they dropped your name from the list. Now that was a tremendous blow, not just the ego, but to my dreams. And it took me several years to come to grips with, good grief, what did you have to have? Well, I went back to school to get some more education, and then I applied for the shuttle program, and then they said I was too old. Well, that statement has kind of followed me a lot through life, because was about 5 years ago, out of the Netherlands, a company called Mars One started looking for people to be willing to go one way and colonize Mars. Well, I got picked on that. For 2 years, I went to Switzerland and Poland and all of the United States promoting Mars One's program, because here I was definitely what they said they were looking for, people that had their prior training, and they were looking for people from the age of 18 to 80. Well, I was only 70 at the time, and I thought, wow, got it made. And sure enough, when they got down to the final 100, they started off with 202,586 volunteers to go one way to Mars. Then after that, they got it down to about 900, then down to 600. Then they got it down, and my name's on the top of the list all the way down. They get down to the final 100, and all of a sudden my name disappeared. So a friend of mine and I, we went through the list of those that had been selected, and not a single one of them was over 60 years old. So obviously they felt I was too old for it. Now, my wife, she said, I would have let you go because I know it was your dream. She says, but I'm glad you're not going one way. I'm glad to keep you at home. So that kind of gets me up to the Mars program. Anyway, after that, I got to looking at it and saying, it's about time to make everything that I have available to the public and to the world. Started looking at it. And a few years before that, actually, I can take it back. Do you mind if I just keep rambling right now, Dave?
I'm fine. I'm fine with it. Eric, are you okay with just letting Ken go like this? I am.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you just you got the ball, Ken. Okay. You got the ball.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. Back in 1995, Richard C. Hoagland came to Seattle, Washington. That's where I was working for the Boeing company. And I forgot to throw that in. Well, after I didn't make it that last time in the 1980 December, I left Houston and Johnston Space Center and went to Seattle, Washington, to go to work for the Boeing company, and became a Boeing 737 flight instructor there. At any rate, let's see, where was I going with that? Wow. Can you guys help me? Where did I stop off? This is okay for a guy my age. I'm only 75, so I'm going to live to at least 180, and 75 is okay, but, there's a lot stacked inside this brain. I've got to remember where I was. What was I talking about?
You were talking about chatting with Richard C. Hoagland while you were working at Boeing.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, I'm on the ball. I'm actually paying attention.
You certainly are. You got to earn your keep. At any rate, I didn't have any students to teach that particular night where he was having this big symposium, and I'd gotten a copy of his book, Monuments of Mars, and one of my good friends called me. He says, "Hey, Richard's going to be in town. Why don't you go get his autograph?" And I'd like to get the author's original autographs, and it's kind of cool. So I thought, oh heck, I'll give him a little note, because I'd heard on the radio with Art Bell that he was looking for people that had might have inside information about NASA and about the space program, and that we really needed to come forward before something happened, because there were some strange things that happened to some of the insiders, and if once you go and once you're dead, it's gone with you. Anyway, so I made up this letter, and I went down to the Coliseum where Hoagland and his team was, and went in to buy my ticket. And I handed the young lady there this letter. I said, "Oh, this letter's for Mr. Hoagland." And she looked at it and read it, and her eyes got big. She looked at me. She says, "Don't move. You're who we've been looking for." And I'm thinking, "Oh, my God, I'm in trouble. What did I do?" So 3 minutes later, Mr. Hoagland comes in from the back. They hadn't started yet. And he spoke a couple words with me. I told him what I did and what my past was with it. He says, "Great, come on in." He put me on the front row. And after it was over with, we made arrangements for him and 3 of his other colleagues to come to my house and take a look at my archive. And here they are. They're looking at things, and they're saying, "Oh, my God, look, this is for real." They've been looking at copies. You know, you use the old copy machines, and you make a copy of a copy, and then another copy of the copy, and pretty soon you can't really tell the detail of what was originally there. Well, that's what they were finding when they would be ordering specific pictures from NASA, and particularly when they were looking at strange things in craters and stuff. And they were looking in pictures, same ID number in my archive, and they were just having fits that it was the information that I had was real. In fact, that my wife says, "Hey, what's this in Dave Scott's visor?" You know, if you want to know what they don't want you to see, what the astronauts are on the moon, you look in the visor of the astronaut being photographed. Well, looking in that visor, you could see the other astronaut off at a distance taking his picture. But then you look at the reflection, and then up in the corner, up in the left-hand corner of his visor, was this object sort of suspended in the lunar non-atmosphere, I should say. And over the period of years, it's wound up that looked very much like a satellite type or station or what have you that was hovering there, observing and watching what was going on. So anyway, that's how I ran into Mr. Hoagland. He decided that the only way to keep me safe was to make me public. So, the next thing he did, he flew me the next day down to Oklahoma City to get the rest of the archive that I had given to the university there, and they weren't using it, so I got it and brought it back. And then 2 weeks later, he paved the way. We went to Washington, D.C. for the National Press Club, and I came forward to most of the press around the world, and I guess that's where I got tagged with that whistleblower. And at that point, they would send ideas and questions and certain pictures and things to Mr. Hoagland. They'd come to me in my archive and check it out and see if it was for real or somebody had, tampered with some of the pictures they were looking at. This went on for a number of years, and then once I finally decided to go more public 2 years ago, we digitized all of the pictures in very high def, and interesting enough, one of the books I put out is the mission reports, and these are the original mission reports from each one of the missions. They were published within NASA within 2 to 3 weeks after each mission. And if you can order and get a copy of them now, you can find they've made alterations and changes and different things like that. They're not the original like what mine are. So we decided to take a digital copy of this to Roswell, and I made a donation to the Roswell International UFO, Library and Research Center. And so I donated a complete copy of my entire archive record. So it wouldn't do them any good to get rid of me, because now the information is public and available everywhere. So now they got to, in essence, I think I'm safe because they've got to protect me. If anything happens to me, then there's going to be a real big investigation going on worldwide. So that kind of brings you up to date a little bit.
Ken, I have a question from one of our audience members, Gail, in the SOR Space Travelers Club, and she is asking, did you break any disclosure laws by keeping or speaking about those photographs?
Well, it's kind of like, I don't care what you do, just get rid of them. To have your secret and your top secret clearances, you have to sign a non-disclosure. Now, we're talking about 47 years ago when I signed that. And you reach a point where your age and stuff, you have to make a decision. Is it something that's dangerous as far as our economy, our country, and the people of America, or is it something that everybody needs to know about? And those were kind of the hard decisions I had to make about coming forward with it. So yeah, I have been tagged followed and debunked so many times by several that I got to the point where I just didn't pay any attention to them until this last trip to India, and I'll tell you about that later when we get to that subject. But I was a little concerned, and I think that Mr. Hoagland was correct in making me public enough that they're not going to send me to Russia to bunk with Snowden, I don't think. But so I think I made the right decision to come forward.
Well, as somebody who, this is Eric, as somebody who has watched and been looking at what you've put out there, thank you. Thank you. It means a great deal to have somebody of your stature putting this stuff out there. I had worked with... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, don't know about the stature, but then when I talk to people that have been employees involved in the programs and things, I tell them, if you have inside information, you need to get it made public, because if anything happens to you, there it goes. We've lost a source, and that's been found to be true no matter what. So, and for that, the only thing is I was willing to take a step forward. And I think that several of us have looked at it kind of like a tsunami wave. Things are building up through a soft disclosure about the contact with extraterrestrials and what we found on the moon and on Mars and what our secret space programs are, which I've only become educated to some of that stuff in the last 2 years. So there's a lot going on, and it's time that it's made available to everybody, because we're now able to handle that kind of information and material. It's time that everybody understands where we're at.
I agree. I think a lot of the naysayers keep going back to the Brookings report. Well,
right.
We as a society have, in a lot of ways, matured since then. I don't think the Brookings report is really a valid reason to stop disclosure. And it seems to me here lately, it's just more and more and more things coming out. It's almost like they're putting it out in such a way that we're just taking it for granted. So I think disclosures within my lifetime, but I think it'll just be, we all wake up one day and it's like, oh yeah, they've always been here. Yeah. That's sort of the impression I'm getting.
Right.
So I was amazed. I just read an article in Discover not too long ago that so much of the original NASA material was just basically thrown away. I mean, that adds a lot of credibility to what you're saying about throw these pictures away, because there's a team of scholars combing the country trying to find some of the original seismic data, because it's come maybe back in the day when the seismic data was collected, they couldn't tell a lot from it. But now they take those same tapes, run them through our new computers, and they're finding a lot of valid information. Why is NASA short-sighted about things like that?
A lot of it has to be worried about control. And, of course, as you mentioned, the Brookings report during President Eisenhower's time, when he requested what would be the possibility of discovering the existence of extraterrestrial past or present. And their report was that we'd probably find it on Mars, the Earth, or on the Moon. And then the question was, well, what should they do about it? And for those who don't know, the directive was that don't make it public because the people aren't ready to handle it. Well, we've had a lot happen since then, and by and large, I'd say the masses of the world are ready to handle the fact that, we may well be aliens to the planet Earth ourselves, and having to do with the manipulation of our DNA. And, you've really got to do a lot of research to get to the point where you can talk about that openly like what I'm saying here, because we're so indoctrinated by our religions, by our governments, by our organizations, and by our friends, that unless you can keep an open mind and do your own research, and I keep saying you do your own research and find out the truth. And I love that phrase, being a theologist myself, study to know the truth, and the truth will set you free. We're at a point now where we can handle knowledge of extraterrestrials and knowledge of how our histories have been changed, and the fact that The reason why they kept it secret: power, control over the people, and money.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I'm in that generation that grew up with, Star Trek, Space 19. I grew up in a sci-fi rich environment. And I think I've always been expecting, I've never doubted that there was some more to the story than what we've been told. I've been expecting, Vulcans to land on the lawn somewhere since I was a kid. Just,
Absolutely.
Now, if you hadn't been able to wrangle that guy to, I love the way you just sort of argued with him till he gave you tacit, just do whatever you want. I love that. If he hadn't, would you have would you have thrown those pictures away, or would there have been some part of you that said this is worth trying to keep anyway?
I'm afraid that my mothers and grandmothers had always taught me that if it's something that's important to you, it's going to be important to other people. So you need to hang on to it. And I guess I'm a pack rat. And thank God I am, because I kept all of that information. And I kept the 8x10 photographs inside of document protectors so they didn't get destroyed by oxygenation and stuff. So when you get a chance to look at the archives that I saved, you're going to look at high-def, detailed scan pictures. Now, mind you, we didn't have photoshopping back in those days. We didn't have all we could do. And I can give you a couple of incidences that I ran into that type of stuff taking place right there under our nose at NASA. You want me to go into that?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. Let's see. After Apollo 14, Dr. Thornton Page, which a lot of people involved in the UFO mysteries and things has heard his name. He's passed away. Dr. Thornton Page was the director of the Lunar and Planetary Science Department, which was at the old Jim West Mansion just outside of the Johnston Space Center. There used to be the Manned Spacecraft Center when I was first there. Anyway, he knew that I was past military and that I understood gun sequence camera projectors and stuff. And for those who don't know what that is, if you've ever seen newsreels and airplanes in a dogfight with another one, and you're seeing videos of the bullets streaking out across, trying to hit the other airplane or what have you, that's a gun sequence camera. And so one of them, I was told to pull a specific 16 millimeter film from the photo department and set up a showing for him and 6 of the other scientists from the LRL. No, not LRL, Planetary Science Group. Anyway, so I went and pulled out the picture, and I got a hold of a gun sequence camera projector and set up the showing for him. And it's in the building right next to the Mission Control Building. I think it's number 8. Could be wrong on that. It's been a few years, almost 50 years now, folks. Anyway, so I set it up, and this camera, and it's important to understand that there were 3 DAC, data acquisition cameras, 16 millimeter cameras. One of them was in the command module, mounted in the window, primary window, and there were 2 in the lunar module. One was mounted in the lunar module pilot to the right-hand side window, and that's the one that actually was looking down on the landing gear ladder where Neil went down and made his first step onto the lunar soil. That one is mounted up there. The other one was a handheld 16 millimeter DAC camera. Anyway, so I'm showing, I take that and I set it up, and I'm showing that 16 millimeter film, and it was about a 15-minute reel of the of the lunar module and the command module going around the backside of the moon. In fact, that particular one was one of the last pictures taken by, just a minute, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who just recently passed away on us. He was actually handling the camera, and if you get a digital copy of the the communications between him and the command module pilot, and as well as the commander, he was talking about there's Tsiolkovsky. Yeah, we see it. Okay, I've got it, and that's the way he's talking when he's got it in framed with his camera. Well, I'm showing this film, and we're approaching Tchaikovsky Crater, and as that particular time, the back half of the moon, about one. Some people they talk about the dark side of the moon. Well, it's not dark all the time any more than the Earth isn't dark all the time, because the Earth's in rotation. Well, so is the moon as it moves around the Earth. So whenever the moon is almost like a new moon, and it's not very bright, the sun is shining on the backside. Or if it's halfway around the Earth, then it's half of the moon is in brightness. Well, this particular incident from Apollo 14, about 1/4 of Tchaikovsky Crater, which is 125 kilometers across, was in dark shadow. And as we're approaching it, and I'm running the camera, in the dark shadowed area, there's this cluster of 5 looking domes illuminated from the inside. And Dr. Page had me stop the projector, freeze it, zoom in, zoom out. And on the gun sequence projector, you can go frame at a time or multiple frames at a time. We did this for about 5 to 10 minutes, looking at it. Finally, we stopped looking at, we were there looking at all these 5 domes inside, zoomed in. And he turned to the other 6 scientists and said, "Well, boys, what do you think of that?" And they all gave a big chuckle and laugh. I didn't realize it at the time, but getting into more research and trying to find some proof of what I've been saying all these years, and thanks to Mr. Brett Shepard, he's found other pictures and views of Tchaikovsky craters at the same sun angle, and he's been able to identify that some where the airbrushers and the painters had missed completely brushing out those domes. Anyway, what I realized is that, he had to know what was on that film before he asked me to check out that 1 15-minute 16-millimeter film and show it to him. But it didn't quite dawn on me at the time. I was so excited about here we had proof that there were alien bases on the moon, and I'm scheduled to show the same reel to them at the main auditorium at the Johnston Space Center the next day to the rank and file scientists, engineers, and janitors, you name it, during a lunch break. And so I set it all up, and I'm showing that. Let's go back. I took that reel. Dr. Page says, "Okay, finish it up and take it back to Photo Lab." Well, I did as I was told, and I checked it in. And the next day, I went and checked out the same number, the same one, set it up in the auditorium, and there were probably several hundred people in there wanting to see what we saw on the backside of the moon. By that, I meant they hadn't seen pictures of close-up of craters and things real from any of the film. So I'm showing it, and we're coming up on Tchaikovsky, and there's the shadowed area, and wow, there's nothing there. I mean, it's dark. So I stopped the camera. I told the audience I'm having technical difficulties. Just a moment. I pulled the film out. I had on white gloves, so I'm checking the film, all of the holes and things lined up properly. And so within 24 hours from when I showed the film to Dr. Page and them, they had to have taken that film, had a duplicate made, enlarged, brushed out what they wanted, shrunk down, put back in, and made a duplicate within 24 hours and put it back in there under the same photo number, or real number, for me to show it. So I put it back in, finished up the showing, and everybody was just excited as they could be because they got to see craters like Tchaikovsky on the backside of the moon, and it was fantastic because people hadn't seen that before. So I had to take and check it back in to the photo lab. And interesting enough, as I'm going through, there was 3 apartments in the photo lab where you could come in front and you could order a specific picture and things, and then you'd come back and pick it up. The other one in the middle is where you could go in and pull certain reels and pictures and frames and stuff and sit down at their tables and do your research there, and then they would put it back up. The inside final third place is where they kept everything in an environmentally controlled room for the film as well as the pictures and things. So as I'm going into the middle room, there's a light table. The light table in this case was by 2 feet by 3 feet, and with a light down with an opaque surface and a light illuminating from underneath. And there were 2 guys and 1 lady were sitting there, and they had 10-inch negatives or positive transparencies, and they were painting things out on it. And I asked them, what are you guys doing? And one of the guys quipped real quick. He says, "Oh, we're professional strippers." And the gal said, "No, what we do is we paint out, we call it stripping out along the horizon to, paint over the stars and things. We don't want people to be confused about what they're seeing there at the moon. And that really disturbed me, but I had to check the film back in. And once I finished checking it in, and I left the photo lab on my way back to the lunar receiving laboratory, I ran into Dr. Page again, and I asked him, I said, what happened to those domes and things on the back side of the moon? And if you ever see a picture of Dr. Page, he had lost an eye, and I'm not sure how he lost it, but he actually looked like a pirate with a patch over one eye. And he looked at me, and he held the one eye that was open, held it closed for a while, and he says there was never anything there. And he opened his eye up again and smiled at me and walked away. I planned to get in and do some more checking later on that, but you have to understand that at the peak of the Apollo program and the early phases of NASA, we were, as contractors, we'd have a job for about 3 years, and then that contract would be over. Either had to be renewed or you had to find a job with another company. And that's exactly what happened to me. That was in 1971, I think, when 72 when 14 flew. Anyway, and that's when I wound up going ultimately to Martin Marietta in Denver, Colorado, and working on the shuttle program for the West Coast Launch Facility. And then once we had the Challenger explosion, we canceled the West Coast thing there, and I went to go to work for my brother's boat company, Jamar Boat Company, and then ultimately wound up in Seattle working for the Boeing Company as a flight instructor. So, you have to play the cards the way they're dealt to you, and that's what it put me up there in Seattle. And I kept my archive with me wherever I went, and usually had to keep them inside of a locked vault safe.
Mm-hmm. Ken, I'm wondering, because one of the things I found interesting with what you were saying was that when you found these domes on the moon while you were using the camera, everybody was kind of laughing, like they already knew that they were there. How many of these type of cover-ups do you think, or photos or videos, do you think NASA has smudged in order to keep it out of the public eye?
We know for a fact that a lot of the pictures that the press got had been painted and later on photoshopped and fixed. And there's a fine young, not young, close to my age, not quite, but Donna Hare. She actually can tell you all about how NASA doctored films and doctored pictures and all kinds of. It was a matter of the way the business was done. If they decided something was not what we needed to show publicly, and then either the whole recording of the communications with the crews never saw the light of day, or the pictures, they were smudged out, painted over, and later on photoshopped. It's been going on ever since the very beginning.
I guess the reason why I ask, and we only have about 2 minutes left before we have to go to break. I guess the reason why I ask is, was this something that NASA knew about before the Apollo programs, that there was extraterrestrial contact or sightings of these bases on the moon, or was this something that they developed over the flights as they went on?
I really couldn't answer that directly. I do know from what my research has shown, and you get into President Eisenhower's deal and his great-great-granddaughter, and the information that she's brought forward, that there apparently is a dark side of our space program that has managed to take information, I should say the technology and stuff, and those domes may well have been ours rather than extraterrestrials, or perhaps both. Because there's some other fantastic shots and pictures that we found when I started high definition scanning all of my pictures and slides and everything else. Brett Shepard zeroed in on one on the front side, and it is a whole base. I mean, I haven't counted how many domes, and it looked like giant radar antennas. And now we have a gentleman coming back into the group, willing to come forward again. His name is Vance Davis. And we can get in and talk to him a little bit, but he's going to be coming to visit us in a few more days. He said he was aware of the communications between the aliens and us on the planet through those antenna systems that they were set up, that I now have in I've had it in my archive alone, but now it's public. You know, when you've got so many pictures and stuff, you don't think about it that much until someone hits you with a question and you stop thinking, well, you know, let's take a look. And you take a look and you discover that something's there you've had all these years. And, oh, my God, could I have missed all this? Well, I wasn't really into UFOs and alien bases and stuff like that until after Richard Hoagland, and then them starting to discover things. And then, life deals you cards. You've got to move, you got to change, you got to retire, and all these things that take place in the normal existence of your life. And then you get into some of these younger people, and they are ready to go to war and say, okay, let's find out what's really there and who's there. So I'm not leading the charge, but I'm certainly sitting on top of that tsunami wave with the rest of them and say, okay, let's get it done. We need to get it disclosed. This is the time for full disclosure, not just soft disclosure.
All right, my friend, I'm going to get you to hold on right there. Eric Markham is joining me, Dave Scott, on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Our guest, Ken Johnston, former NASA employee. He's got some great pictures that we are going to talk about. We're also going to get to your questions coming up, because I know they're starting to pile up. I got them written down, and we will be getting into those momentarily as well. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
The third Monday of every month, Spaced Out Radio is going to bring you a different look at everything paranormal. Welcome to The Reporters. Jim Mallard, Vanessa Hogel, Denise Garcia, and Christina George join me, Dave Scott, for a look at the weird and strange from the other side of the microphone. We'll break down ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, and the people investigating them. The paranormal media has never been heard like this. Come listen to The Reporters.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you along for the ride. Tomorrow night and Sunday, Uncle Jimbo, James Tyson, and Elizabeth Anglin are back in the cabin. I will be off trying to find my Zen, my Chi in the wilderness of British Columbia. Maybe I'll find a good cave to huddle up in, catch some Wi-Fi signal, and listen in to Spaced Out Weekend, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in our terrestrial stations, WQEE 99, Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia. Good to have you with us, as well as the United Public Radio Network, live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you along. We're live in Las Vegas on Renegade Talk Radio and on Revolution Radio. Remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, and oh my God. Bill, I don't like you right now. I hope you spill your syrup that you're going to get from your maple trees. Elogofuscio hippopoconrius. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that again. But that is your Spaced Out Radio password for the night. Thank you, Bill Cardwell, for making me laugh. Thank you. Hey, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can tune us in on TuneIn, download this show and others on iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live on Stitcher, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. While there, you could check out all the plethora of features that we have for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can also head over to patreon.com. That's Patreon.com. Patreon.com and become a patron of Spaced Out Radios today. Tonight we are talking with Ken Johnston, former NASA employee. This guy is in the know. If you've missed the first hour, you're going to want to catch it again, because I really don't think we've had someone this knowledgeable talking about NASA on this show since we began. We're also joined by Eric Markham from The Encounter Online at spacedoutradio.com. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Ken, I'm very curious in regards to the moon landings. There is so much debate whether or not all the moon landings absolutely happened or not. Can you confirm with 100% proof that we, as mankind, made it to the moon?
Well, I think the best way to look at it is when you've got, well, like I said, Grumman laid off 30,000 of us nationwide. You take that and you blow that on up the entire Apollo program. There were several 100,000 of us. To be able to fool that many people that we weren't there, that we didn't go, I think is kind of foolish and stupid to even take that approach. The real question is, okay, if we went there, why didn't we go back? And what did we really find on the moon? Those are the real questions you want to ask, instead of, like Buzz Aldrin had this supposed reporter came up and says, "No, you lied, you never went to the moon, blah, blah." And finally, Buzz got fed up and turned around and slugged him and knocked him down. Well, when you're sitting right there with communications, and in fact, that there were ham radio operators who were following the signals, and they had their antennas. They could check the direction that the feed of the signals where they were picking up. And so they bloody well know that we went to the moon, and they know that we were sitting on the moon at a fixed location, not orbiting around. So, there are all kinds of very quick and easy ways to prove that we actually did go to the moon. But the only question is what we discovered. Whose was it? Was it ours? Was it ET's? Or, is there more for us to learn there? I'd say it's still a fascinating question for me.
Well, and I can understand where it is a little bit fascinating in regards to whether or not we've landed. I mean, there's the whole theory and the conspiracy that Stanley Kubrick made things happen. There's the conspiracy that once we shut things down, it went more into a secret space-type program that led to, the infamous...
Okay. Let me save you some time right there.
Yeah?
Let me save you a little time right there. We do have the Hubble spacecraft, right?
Yes.
Everybody agrees there. That's great. And the Hubble telescope can zero in on each one of our landing sites, as well as our satellites that are going around the moon. Those have made pictures. They've sent pictures back that have been picked up and looked at. And at every single one of the landing sites, there is the descent stage of the lunar module sitting right at the site. There are the tracks after Apollo 14. There are the tracks of the rovers that tackle them. How did those get on the moon if we didn't land and go to the moon? That's how simple it is to answer that question. But you find people that they've got their mind made up, they want to stay stupid, and I say, belly to you, go for it.
No, I understand that, but were there any other Apollo missions after publicly it was shut down? Because there is the conspiracy, whether it's been faked or not, about an Apollo 20 program where we apparently took video, landed on the moon, took video of inside a crashed spaceship where they found the infamous Mona Lisa. Do you believe in all that?
No, not all of it. Some of it. Well, first of all, we had, at Grumman, we had an assembly line of lunar modules. We had the lunar module in the assembly line after Apollo 17 for Apollos 18, 19, and 20. Those were still in the assembly line and various stages of completed, ready to go. Same thing with the command module and the Saturn V rockets. They were all there. They did decide to use one command module after Apollo 17, and they used it for the Apollo Soyuz, the Russian and America rendezvous and friends in space big show that we did, and we allowed astronaut Deke Slayton, who was one of the original sevens, to finally get to go into space on that. So we know that the spacecrafts on Apollo 18 were used. Now, Apollo 19 and 20, there's still a question. Okay, where are they? Were they, where did they go? Were they used? I can't answer that because I wasn't still with the program there. I know we had astronauts already selected that were scheduled to fly on 18, 19, and 20. But I don't have any first-hand source that I can, rely on that says, yes, we did, and we did these things that we're talking about. As long as we stick back with from 17 all the way down to, the first one that just flew the moon, that was Apollo 4, actually, I think, where we went around the moon and came back. So, I stick with what I have first-hand knowledge of, and until I get it from the actual source, it's just, hearsay. So I can't answer that question.
Question from our audience, this one coming from the Revolution Radio chat room, and Olive is asking, was the 1969 landing faked and filmed near Area 51 as conspiracy theorists believe?
Here's what happened, and I pretty well confirmed this, so I can feel like I'm accurate on this, is that one of the things that we could not bear to have happen would be to have a crash on the first one because of the race with the Russians. And of course, we know they had a crash too. But then, so we did get Kubrick, the government, had them create a fictional landing and very quickly out and grab a few samples and, and take off and get back. In the event that we actually crash landed, we would already have some way of, being prepared for that type of a situation. The government's always good about, and being in a military, in the Marine Corps, when you're planning an objective at all, you give several different scenarios. What are you going to do if this happens? Well, okay, if that has okay, but what about this other thing? So long as you have planned for the other situations, you're in a better shape than just letting something happen and react to it at emotional level at that moment. So I have no problem with hearing that there was a cinema film made of a fake movie film showing that we landed on the moon. And so, they could have played that and said, okay, and we took off the moon, and on the way back we had a disaster and everybody died. That's a game that the bigwigs can play that game if they want to, but we were quite successful in getting our guys there and getting them back. Apollo 13 was the closest thing we went through, and I don't know whether Richard Nixon, I know he shut down pretty much the whole Apollo program, and my concern is we don't want to take any more chances. We've been so successful with getting the other 12 astronauts on the moon and back that we don't want to run the chance of it. But it cost us more to shut down the Apollo program, and then it would have cost us to do the last 3 flights. So there's still questions in there, but I'm okay with the fact that there may have been some, but it wasn't that because they faked the whole thing. They made a fake in the event we had a disaster. Does that sound logical?
That makes total sense. Deb is asking at #SpacedOutRadio on Twitter, why did we stop going to the moon? Was it just money? Was it a cut in budget, a change in direction, or the old theory of we were asked not to return?
Okay, on Apollo 17, after they had done the TEI, which is a trans-Earth insertion, the burn that took us out of lunar orbit and headed us back towards the Earth, we have ham radio operators that had recorded the device. There were friends of mine that worked at Mission Control that said that they actually heard the communications. I was, as I mentioned earlier, I was no longer directly in control with Grumman after Apollo 11, but and the comments were is that the communications came from the vicinity right there of the moon. It said, "Do not return. You're not ready." So that, along with the decision to cancel the rest of the programs, you take that, or you take the fact of the fear of possibly losing some of the astronauts in the missions, the last 3 missions, since we've been so successful, even with Apollo 13 getting them back. That period of time now, we're talking 47 years, or depending on which flight, that has passed, and we are now at a point where we are ready to go back. We are ready to accept the fact that we're not alone. In fact, that was it last year. The Pope came out and said, "There's bound to be intelligent life elsewhere in the universe." How come the church has one of the biggest telescopes in the world set up just out here? Was it New Mexico or Arizona? And a lot of the other things. There's so much information that governments and religious organizations have about the existence of intelligent beings that even you go back into and being a theologian, you go back and look at. I like to look at it this way: when it comes to are we the only species in heaven? Are we the only ones that God created? Well, that kind of limits my opinion of what God is. So you have to look at it and say, okay, look at the Veda, or whatever it's called, the Indians' history. You look at the biblical history. You look at the ancient Sumerian stuff that Zachariah Sitchin translated and all, and you start comparing what each one of these beings or events and things were, and you start looking at them and you start bringing them closer and closer together, and I kind of like fold my fingers together, and it's like machine gears all mashing together, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, there is actual history that tells the truth that we need to take a look at, that we are not the only human beings in the whole universe. We may be pretty primitive compared to what we can look at some of these histories that has taken place here on this planet, on the planet Earth. So that gets us almost up to your paranormal.
I've been dying to ask you this question for 2 years, ever since I had Terry Ling on this program. And she told me this off the air, and it gave me goosebumps. And I'm so excited I get to actually ask you it right now. Did Neil Armstrong say after he was walking on the moon, "They are here, they are watching us"?
Again, I was not in mission control when that happened, but my friends said, here's what happened. And you've got, what's his name? The major #1 debunker and all this stuff. One-time friend of mine. I'll just say, the major debunker guy. When it was said that, Neil went to the private line talking to the doctor, well, what he tries to say, there is no such thing, blah, blah, blah. Well, yes, the mission director can shut off all the other people sitting there in mission control, with the exception. He can put just the medical doctor for that flight on and himself. And according to my sources, then Neil said, they're here. They're on the side of the crater. They're watching us. And that was the extent of that part of the conversation when it was put on a secure line, just secure communications. So I'm hoping that my friend gets here, that Vance Davis has some more inside information on that too. So we'll find out.
Just a quick follow-up question with that. Do we know at any time if, after he made that comment, if the extraterrestrials watching approached Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin or any other astronaut that walked on the moon?
No, we don't have a... Oh, well, okay. I may have to swallow this one here. I'm sure that they weren't, that they were just being observed. But now, when Neil and Buzz and Mike were on the way to the moon, and I may have mentioned that a little earlier, that this light device or something was following them, and it was close enough they could see it was a solid structure, and they asked where the SRB was to get some idea as to. They didn't want to come out and say, we think an unidentified object is following us to the moon, because they'd be told to abort and not land, and this was the first dedicated landing opportunity. So whether they asked where it was the SRB, and they came back and says, it's about 17,000 miles at this direction. Well, they thanked him, and they continued on. And later, not just Buzz Aldrin came out last year, and he was saying this craft or thing followed them all the way to the moon. And he says, since nobody knew what it was, and he uses the phrasing like that, he says, I guess you have to call it an unidentified flying object. So Buzz comes out. Now, you've got so many of the other astronauts that have talked about observing craft and things like that, follow them all the way to the moon, etc. Now, what I'm saying, I may have to change a little what I'm saying here, is when I mentioned if you want to see what they didn't want you to see, look into the visor of the astronaut that's EVA and see what's out there reflecting. And there are some pictures in my archive of stuff in the visor. In fact, that Brett Shepard just recently found one, and it really looks like a being at a little distance standing there observing. So your question, did any of them know that they were being observed? I'm going to have to change what I've thought all this time and say, it's entire possibility that some of them did. And now's the time that the few of them, by the way, this gets me, because I'm turning 75 here in a couple months. And I was 15 years younger I was the youngest of the civilian astronaut consultant pilots. And almost all of those guys are gone now. And unless they've recorded, I was going to say, there are two people that have come forward in deathbed confessions about extraterrestrials, the space program, and all of these things. Bill Pollack is one particularly, and he was involved with developing the security systems for Dulce. The other gentleman was with Rockwell International, I think. I was trying to find it here on my computer real fast. I can't remember the gentleman's name. But
are you talking Ben Rich?
Forward. Yes, sir. Yeah,
Lockheed Skunk Works?
Absolutely. And it's interesting that things that they came forward with, I think he's still alive. That has confirmed things that I've talked about all my life. And it's kind of nice that people that are riding this tsunami wave are coming forward now, because now's the time for full disclosure. Let's get the information out there so we can all start dealing with it. Biggest problem they got is, we're on a petroleum-based, economy, that it messes things up if we, but it's time. It's time for us to make a major change here. And I'm ready for it.
Let's get to Joe's question. And Joe is asking, how is it possible for NASA to continue to say nothing is on the moon with all the photographic evidence out there? It's like a little kid with cookie dust all over his face saying he didn't eat a cookie.
Yeah. So much of departmental information, keeping it in the different departments. And I said earlier, about every 3 years we would get end of a contract, we'd have to move off, et cetera. So we didn't get a chance. Now, there was a period of time after Apollo when people were asking, well, why don't we go back to the moon? Before then, right after the last Apollo flight, there were collectors that went around to all of the different engineers and people like that and went to their homes and asked them if they had any books, documents, and records and things of that. And they collected them. They took them away. I claimed I didn't have anything, and I got away with it. But it's I don't know where you want to go with the rest of that, but it's bring me up to date here again, will you?
Well, just in regards to whether or not NASA continues to try and fool people on their photographic evidence of what is on the moon or not.
Yeah. It appears that, yes, they would, although recently, with the Freedom of Information Acts and people getting smart enough to be able to go in, and you've had so many, what have you had, 3 generations happen since then, if you want to call it, at least 2 generations, and there are people that just will process a request for information. They'll go to the library, the lab, and they'll pull it out, make a copy, and send it off without even looking at it or worrying about it. And a lot of this stuff is now coming to, in reality, people are discovering that, yes, they did hide things all this time. All of it based back up on Brookings, that no, we couldn't have it, couldn't handle it. And then again, doctoring up those that were so obvious, they had to doctor them up. And then they've set that way inside the archives and their archives and records. I'm sure the originals are in a file someplace in a nice cold vault someplace that are still available. But the ones that have been replaced, they've been replaced by doctored up and copied ones. That's what you wind up getting when you go in and look at it. That's what's going on even in my era, my time.
Have you thought, okay, with what you've seen on the moon, I mean, your personal experience seeing the film footage, there's the domes, there's the base, and then when you go to show it to others publicly, nothing's there. Do you find, like with Keith Laney, that he looks at these high-def photos from Mars and seems to see relics there? Have you two ever crossed paths and compared notes?
Just very shortly, quite a few years ago, when I was here up in the Albuquerque area, when he was with, I'm pretty sure that was the one, he was with Richard Hoagland at the time, when he was just making arrangements to start getting and duplicating all of the NASA archives. He is being able to now look at all of the stuff, and he's making it available for all of us. And like I said, we're in the 2 generations since then, and people are now able to go in and look at some of the pictures, and they're discovering for themselves. But not all of them are the originals that show things that I was privy to, and hopefully those will be made available. It's time to get the truth out there. And the thing is that people now, like you said, we started off with back in the early Apollo days, whenever, after Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and the movie theaters, and to the point where humans they panicked when the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells was done on radio. Some of the people panicked and jumped off of buildings and committed suicide because they thought the aliens were here taking over the earth and they were going to die. So they just, that was crazy. But now, the fact that James Oberg and I were talking one time in his office, and we were discussing what would be the effect if a flying saucer were to land on the White House lawn, and this big fuzzy-looking character, he came walking off the deal, and the little kid will say, "Look, Mom, there's the Cookie Monster. He's my friend." So, as a society, we've come a long ways. We're at a position where we could handle the fact that we're not the only intelligent beings around. So, a lot is going on right now, and you said you hope it happens in your lifetime. My sources are telling me that 2017 is the year of disclosure, and it's about time. I think our ancestors, if I want to call them that, have had enough patience waiting on us to grow up to where they're going to kind of continue to help. Now, if they had landed at any major government in the world, the governments could have hidden the information. It probably have been a battle award or what have you. But by doing the one-on-one contact that's been going on, the groups of people that are bonding together in every country, every nationality, called experiencers that have had contact, it's to me a more intelligent way. You get the masses of intelligent people in the world to the extent and point where you can't keep this bottled up any longer. Even the people trying to do what their jobs tell them to keep it secret have hit a point where why should we keep this secret anymore? Everybody else knows about it. So it's going to happen in your lifetime, but a lot sooner than what you think.
I just find myself seeing with disclosure building almost the same phenomenon I witnessed and lived through when the Berlin Wall came down. There was, from the time I was born in 1963, this evil empire over there called Russia, and just when it fell, it seemed like it happened overnight, but there were these things that kept happening up to that point. And I see the same buildup happening now with disclosure. More and more is leaking out. I mean, more and more people are coming out and saying, we've known this, which leads me to this question. Have any astronauts that you worked with ever came forward and just taken you in their confidence and said, guess what happened?
I'm going to have to say no, not directly, and part of it is just that I'm just going to have to say no. They have not. They did not. By the way, since I'm 1 year older than you, you have to respect your elders here. I'm surprised that you mentioned you're 63. Way to go! I was born in Excuse me. No, my math is terrible. I was born in 1942. If you were born in 63, oh my God. Take my shoes off and count my toes. I get it right.
I was born in 73. I'm the kid here.
Hey, if it doesn't have milli equivalents per deciliter behind it in math, I can't do it.
Well, we're talking about multiple generations right here.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 generations sitting here, and look at what we've seen just in my lifetime. The whole idea of 3 people scattered across the world having a conversation in real time while a handful, several other hundreds and thousands are listening in was inconceivable. I mean,
it was.
And we take this for granted. I mean, look what a special effects coup it was in 2001 Space Odyssey to have the picture phone. Now people carry, you can have, a FaceTime conversation with your grandkids in England when you're sitting in North Carolina with a handheld, more or less disposable telephone. I think we're ready.
Yeah. I agree. If you go back though, as far as my age, when somebody says, well, do you know anything about this and that? And I go, wow, let me think. Let's see. I think that in the meantime, your generations, or both of you guys' generations, you got your cell phone out there, you've typed in a few things, and you've got the answer right there. And, I don't think in terms of, okay, where is this? This stupid thing I carry in my hand is like the ancient Sumerian text talked about the people I saw the aliens holding this rock in their hand, and they were talking to somebody in this rock. Well, what are you doing with a cell phone there? It's the same darn thing. So here we are, a little more advanced, and I have to stop and say, okay, wait a minute. Yes, I guess I could go to my cell phone and find the answer to that, but I usually go through the mental process first, and if I have the books or the records or what have you, I'll go there first. But you guys have got it all going for you. But the thing is, some of the old people have it in their mind, their brain. They experienced it, and the newer generations, they'll look it up and get an answer real quick, and then it goes poof, it's gone. They don't remember it.
What do you think of all these people, Ken, who talk about this whole flat Earth theory?
I'm glad you brought that one up. I get hit with that sometimes on tours, and I said, well, you be very careful on your way going home, because you might fall off the edge of the Earth. So, if they want to believe that, and people do that because they want to be, they want to stand out. They don't care if they stand out because they're looking stupid. But in the 3rd grade, would you believe, and that was back when I was a little more smart than now, the teacher was talking about the backside of the moon was always dark and everything else. And I challenged her, and I got the globe, and I got another a ball, and we had a flashlight, and I showed them how the moon rotated at the same rate as the Earth spins 24 hours, and yet they both move around the sun. and explained it all to her, and she finally understood it. Well, I didn't think of it that way. Well, we've grown up and we've learned a lot. And so the flat earth is just their way of getting attention. And it's pretty sad that they have to, like Buzz Aldrin got tired of them. Somebody's going to deck them one of these days. I get tired of the same thing about saying, well, we didn't land on the moon. And then once I go through the Hubble thing and I go about the satellites, and I'll tell them, okay, so those are still sitting there. How did they get there? Some of them will say, well, I guess I'm going to have to go look into that. That's as far as they'll go. They won't say you're right, and they won't admit it themselves. But they'll say, well, I better go look at that. As far as they'll go. So, people just will be people, and I guess what do they want to do that floats their boat, as we like to say, that's what they're going to live with.
Another question I have for you is, what about the secret space program? Are you someone who buys into this theory that a lot of people believe we have gone to Mars, we have bases on the moon, we've investigated other planets?
Probably 4 years ago or so, I probably would have stood pretty strong and saying, no, this was the beginning, yet I looked at some of the Bhagavad Gita, etc., and that was obviously from the history of contact with extraterrestrial life and what have you. But getting involved in trying to create and put everything available to the world, in my autobiography, and then the mission reports, and then the direct copies of the original archive that I had, stuff has made me go back and look at and being in touch with people with more experience in that area that I've started questioning, and I look at it, and when you go back to Eisenhower and apparent proof that those things took place, and then with these last two deathbed confessions that I was just talking about, I'd have to say absolutely, we obviously do have a secret space program, and it's, maybe that's one of the things that's kept us from going to war with Russia, is that we're all part of one secret space program going on now. And that brings me up to some of the pictures that I have that we've started publishing now, is showing the alien bases and the domes and all the things that are there on the lunar surface. The question is whose are they? Are they the extraterrestrials? Are they ours? And then my friend I'm talking about that I've known for 20-some-odd years, Vance Davis, said he was involved in the communications with the alien bases on the moon and our bases on the moon, because he was a specialist in communications in Germany on the west side of the Berlin Wall, and keeping track of communications with the Russians on the eastern side. In fact, that person became a very dear friend of mine, Boris Yaroslavtsev, who was a communications specialist for Russia on the east side. And as fate would have it, I wound up introducing the two of them there in Seattle. They wound up, Vance was up from Arizona, came up to give a little talk, and then Boris was a friend of mine at the local Masonic Hall, and I got the two of them together, and they started talking, and Vance says, your call sign was this, and Boris was like, yeah, you talk like this too, and so they knew each other from either side of the wall, which, we humans and governments have ways of trying to hide things, and if Vance says they had that kind of communications back then, and the ability to do that, I'm waiting for him to get here in the next few days, and we're going to have a conversation just about the questions you just asked. Are those our communication bases on the moon? I know we've got some towers right along the terminator between the front side and the back side, antennas that stick up high enough that help them communicate from the back side to the front side and to the earth. So there's a lot of evidence in the pictures and the archives I have that says there definitely is a program, a space program beyond what we learned in Apollo and Skylab and the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station. I mean, why have we been stuck in low Earth orbit when we had the technology to have gone on to Mars by 19 1979. We landed on the moon in 69. 10 years later, we should have been on Mars. Well, maybe we were.
Do you think then that they are using the Van Allen belt as an excuse?
Absolutely, because and I get that question. We would all die. No, okay. When you're going through the Van Allen belt and at over 17,000 miles a minute, the amount of radiation that you pick up going through the Van Allen belt is, and according to the records we had back in my day, it was no different than having your teeth x-rayed. That's not very, we'd all die if we had died from that amount of radiation just having our teeth checked once a year or something. So, Van Allen belt, and there's something that's come out here in the last month, I think is probably where you're going, is that they're saying that maybe they misunderstood the Van Allen belt and that it could well be a no-go for us to go to interstellar. But I'm still a believer that because our astronauts lived a long time, we blasted right straight through it, went to the moon, and we came back through it on the way coming down. So it apparently is not as... if you want to go up there and stay in and get a real good suntan, you could get the Van Allen belt. Would just wipe you out real fast. No problem.
Eric at hashtag Spaced Out Radio wants to know, were there any other reports regarding alien bases or communication from any cosmonauts back in the day? Has that ever come out?
Just in the quick memory thought here, I know I've heard a little conversation that they had some experiences during their Earth orbits and things, and we're getting a lot of pictures recently. NASA dumped a whole lot of pictures around the International Space Station, and there's all kinds of debris as well as craft and things that coming in and close and then moving away. And with the Soviets, I wish I had more information about that, but I'm quite sure that they've had the same kind of experience that we've had. After all, space may not be all that big of a place after all,
Is there a time or a place where us with our amateur telescopes could see something on the moon? Or would we need to be up close and personal because they are so camouflaged?
Well, with your own telescopes, unless even the Hubble, it's difficult for it to identify the lunar module descent stages. But with our orbiting satellites that are going around and sending signals back, as well as pictures, digital, coming back, the quality back, that it becomes... Now, I have, as I said, my editor and friend, Mr. Brett Shepard, he's an artist. I mean, he is a fantastic artist. And artists use a different part of their brain to look at things than what us engineers do. And he'll take a picture and he says, "Oh, my God, take a look at this." And I say, "What are you talking about?" And after he brings it up, and either he highlights something different or he points out the different items there that make it more clearly. And then I say, "Oh, my gosh, you're right. I can see that now." We're people are able to look at these things, and they're able to discover and find more and more evidence of ancient ruins. And if you get into the ancient Sumerian and the ancient Indian legends and records, there are stories about certain ones of their gods that went to the moon, and they stayed there for a long time. I mean, in Sitchin's book, Inke, he, and I can't think of the other guy's name, went to the moon, and they were there so long that the people thought maybe they had gone back to Nibiru. And so, but you have to understand, if these are the highest ranking of their tribes, in other words, royalty, they're not going to go there by themselves. They're going to take a whole entourage with them. It's going to build them someplace where they can live, either under a dome or what have you. So there are ancient ruins and things, especially on Mars, that have become very visible. And some of the other things, I've seen the pictures, and because they've been sent back in digital form, and then they've been doctored. When you look at there's an area where we know that there's a base on Mars, and you do the analysis of the photos, and you look at where the pixels are and where they've smudged out and changed, things, why change it if there's nothing there? So, yes, we're discovering more things even in my archive. People from around the world are saying, "Oh man, would you take a look at this?" And we'll pull up that particular NASA photo that I have and say, "Whoa, I think you're right. There must be something there." So we're at a point where this stuff is getting disclosed, and it's getting where they can't keep it quiet any longer. Not when you've got the evidence staring you in the face.
I've often wondered, though, some of these things, and I'll be upfront, I believe in arcologies on the moon and on Mars, but how do we rule out pareidolia on somebody? If you're looking for something, your brain is going to sort of fill in the blanks.
Isn't it interesting that the government and the medical professions came up with a new term, pareidolia, to explain away something that they don't want to have to deal with? Okay, they can say, "Oh, well, that's just pareidolia," but yeah, I know good and well. You go to the wall in the men's room and you're looking at the wall there, and all of a sudden you're making all kinds of faces and things and kind of pictures.
Yeah,
have you ever done that? No,
yeah.
Never mind. Okay.
Yeah, just stare at the terrazzo floor, and
there you go.
See faces or some forms come out. Yeah,
right. But now when you start looking at crop circles and you start looking at other pictures and things, and you give yourself the chance to look at it, and you start, the old story that one picture's worth 1,000 words. If you look at the means of communications that may be being used to communicate with us Homo sapiens in a pictorial form to start with, rather than mental telepathy or what have you, until we are able to use that part of our brain we've lost. But it's not all pareidolia. That's a great way of dismissing a great deal of information that's out there. But whenever you take the analysis and go and you start looking at the pixels and the information that is presented there, you can rule out a lot of what's just fictitious and that is from your mind. So there's two sides of that coin to look at.
Well, I remember back when the original Face on Mars photograph was released, and then they came back with a supposedly high-resolution picture of that same area on Mars, and it looked like, basically a cat litter box. Like, it was obliterated. I got to wonder if, they had the opportunity then and there, and I think they missed it.
When you say they missed what? Is what I'm asking.
I think they should have. I don't think that picture is legit. That if the Face on Mars area, I don't think that what the high definition picture that came back in the 90s.
Okay.
It looks like it's been destroyed or doctored to look like there's nothing there but just a raised hill. But the symmetry around the base of that hill, to me, still kind of gives it away. It's an artificial. If you wipe the face off, the base of that area looks too, I don't know, artificial.
That's a good term. I've been wanting you to say the word Cydonia. There's so much at that particular site, that area on Mars, that you can't just dismiss the whole thing because someone says, "Well, look at there, that part of the face is collapsed," or what have you. But the other pictures that aren't necessarily all released to the public and stuff, you can find that, like you said, the buttresses along the large pyramid, if you will, those things, even the face, and then several other areas. There's so much information there on Cydonia that it definitely appears that it had to be a. And then part of that is you get back to, again, I'm going to go back to ancient Sumerian texts and stuff, where they took, try to remember something, and they they sent him to Mars to live out his life on Mars because he had done bad things, and then you wind up that they made a monument and they buried him inside of it. Well, good grief, that sounds very much like the face there on Mars. So we're starting to bring ancient history into modern science and modern space, and discover that there's information available out there. Let's check it out and be sure that it's true.
Yeah, I have to admit, after reading the Bhagavad Gita translation with modern eyes, well, close as I can come, but yeah, you read that with modern eyes, and the Vimana sounds very much like a spaceship or some kind of aircraft, and right. You've got I look at the way some of this stuff has been written, and you touched on it earlier about the guy talking into a rock. Well, if there's a primitive people or a society has fallen, and you're trying to document what there was before it's forgotten, something's going to get lost in translation, and you're going to get creation myths that come out like Genesis does, or the different cultures have these, our gods came from the skies and we came up from the ground. Yeah, there's a common theme that runs through all this, and it just kind of makes me think that what we've been taught, what we've heard all our lives, is sort of a primitive attempt, or it was the best we could do at the time, and we ran with it. But these new facts that are coming out, where do you think that, we're going to learn about our true ancestry very soon?
Very soon. The people, they have to try to describe something to the best of their ability with the vocabulary that they have at that time. And like I said, with the talking to a stone, or let's say the craft. Who was that? We was talking to a guy today. It's one of the mythologies. Tried to fly to the sun, but his wings, the wax melted on the wings, and the wings fell away, and he fell back to the earth. That could well have been a craft that lost its thrust, what have you. All of that, it depends upon what the society is at the time that they're exposed to. That you look at some of the famous art work that's been done throughout several hundreds of years, and you see what the artists put into the horizon or put in above the town, or flying saucers or spacecraft. Why would an artist do something like that unless he was trying to describe something that he couldn't explain? Just do the best they can with what they've got. Well, what was that? There was something just recently happened that I'm trying to think what it is, and part of that was those disclosures that we were talking about, the two guys that have done that. There's the evidence is becoming much, much more clear for us all to accept and understand that we couldn't have. I'm going to be going to Aurora, Texas, next week for, I think it's next week, or maybe a few weeks later. And there was supposedly a crash there, and a being that survived for a good long while, and they buried him in their cemetery and all of this stuff. Back in the horse and buggy days, people just have to describe things the best they could with what they had at the time. So our job is to try to take that and then bring it up to our modern technology and our modern way of looking. How would we describe if we saw something like that tomorrow? Mm-hmm. To the best we can.
Ken, I'm going to hop in here because we only got about 2.5 minutes before the break. If you feel like it, you can hop on with Eric and I for hour number 3, or if you choose that you want to call it the night, I'll leave that up to you during the break. But I do want to get this question in from one of our newer listeners, Alano, out of Vancouver, British Columbia, on Twitter at #SpaceOutRadio. And she is asking, in all of your research, when you look at what is on the moon, do you feel that maybe there are space portals up there so that way we can planet hop or hop back and forth to Earth?
I'm not sure they know what to mean by hop, but I will guarantee you that with each mission that we made to the moon, once we flew back up and got back to the command module, transferred all of our samples and materials, and we separated the ascent stage of the lunar module from the command module, we'd fire the retro rockets remotely from mission control and cause the upper stage to impact on the lunar surface. And part of the ALSUP, the Apollo Instrumentation Page, get the acronym right, they had seismographic equipment on board to record any type of seismic activity. And if you've ever seen pictures of seismology being done when they're looking for oil and what have you, and they'll set off an explosion or what have you, and the needles on the paper will just squiggle back and forth for a few seconds or a few minutes, and it stops. Well, interesting. I mean, I have the pictures of it. It shows the seismographic or the part of the ALSUP package when the lunar module ascent stage impact, and it rang like a bell, not for 6 minutes, 6 hours, but for 6 days. It was still able to detect the ringing. Wow. And part of our communications with our spacecraft coming around from the backside of the moon, initially we were expecting it to show up at a certain location, a certain time, and sometimes they would come off, would be not a great deal of difference, but significant distance away from it was, and they discovered it was what they call mass concentrations of metallic or what have you. So it might be artificial.
All right. On that note, we're going to hop out for our final break of the night. Ken Johnston, our guest. His website, kenjohnstonmedia.net. If you want to check out his photographs, his information. The preacher, Eric Markham from the Encounter Online, is with me as well. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. We will be back after our final break.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit. And expect a miracle.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 mediums and a large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories. From alien encounters to the latest conspiracies, you won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to anymore.
Welcome back to the final hour of Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you along for the ride on this St. Paddy's Day, still on the West Coast. Are you wearing green? I am right now. My daughter sitting beside me is not, so I'm going to give her a little pinch here. There you go. Anyhow, tomorrow night and Sunday, Uncle Jimbo's James Tyson is in the cabin with Elizabeth Anglin as they host Spaced Out Weekend. I will be packing my bags right after the show, head out into the wilderness to find my Zen and my Chi, but you can listen in because we are 7 days a week right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in our terrestrial stations tonight. The United Public Radio Network live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, where they film The Walking Dead. Good to have you with us as well. Thank you so much for showing on up. We are also live on Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas and Revolution Radio. Remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set an impossible password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. I gotta say, there aren't many words that are intimidating, but this one is. Iliogofusio hippopocunerus. I don't know if I got it or not, but I will not repeat it. That is your SOR Space Travelers password of the night. So please make sure you use it wisely if you're in the Space Travelers Club. If you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio as well if you want to join us for the chat during the show. You can also go to our plethora of chat rooms that we have going on Spreaker, on Revolution Radio, on Facebook, on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on the UPRN network. We're right in there with you as well. And I can tell you this, we got some exciting places where you can hear this show. Our YouTube channel is Spaced Out Radio Show. You can tune us in on TuneIn, download this show and others on iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and on Stitcher. Our website, once again, is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of information for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. And if you head over to patreon.com, that's patreon.com, you can become a patron of Spaced Out Radio for as low as $1 a month. Very, very cool to have Ken Johnston on the show. Ken did have to run because he has to be up at 6 a.m. and he's in New Mexico. There's a big hot air balloon event that he helps out with, so he has to go to that. But him and Brett Shepard will be back on Spaced Out Radio together on May 23rd. That's going to be a great show. Brett Shepard, by the way, will also be on the 29th of this month, so we're going to talk more about the moon and everything that goes along with it. The preacher, Eric Markham, editor of the Encounter Online, is back with us tonight. He's going to go the distance with me. Eric, welcome up. He was here. Unless he turns his microphone on. I'm hoping. Where are you, preacher? I think his microphone went kind of dead. I don't know. Eric, I'm going to call you right back because we seem to be a little stuck on the Skype end. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about Ken coming on the air was the fact that he answered the questions quite candidly. He told us what he knew. He told us what he didn't know. And he also told us what the plausibilities were. And I like the fact that he was very candid in his answers, especially around whether or not we have bases on the moon right now. Eric, do you want to just say hello? I'm just wanting to see if we got you. I'm not having you. I'm going to try you on your cell phone, Eric, so make sure you check things out there if you don't mind. So, one of the things that I really enjoyed about Ken being on the air with us was when we asked him point blank about what Neil Armstrong said on the private room, on the private channel, when he said they are here, they are on top of the crater, and they are watching us. I don't know about you guys, but I seem to get real chills when he said that, because one of the things that I had heard from Terry Ling from MUFON, Florida, when she was on this show, was that it was very, very real that had happened. And when you have that happen, it's hard to understand that this is true and that it's been covered up. Think of all those photographs that NASA had smudged out. Think of all those other sections that we tried to get on the air with. There you are. We got you, Eric. We're going to bring you back in.
All right.
Now. All right. We got Eric Markham back with us. He had a little bit of a computer issue that melted down. But that's okay. It happens. Preacher, welcome back.
We're glad to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things I was saying, my friend, was how candid Ken was with his answers. He was, and the one thing that, whether you agree with what he was saying or not, Eric, the one thing that I liked was if he didn't know, he said it. He's only telling us what he had learned. And the other thing that I liked about it was over time, he was basically saying some of his ideas of what he didn't believe, compared to what he knows now, he wasn't afraid to say that he had changed his ideas in a lot of those subjects, Eric. What's your thought?
Oh, we had talked during the break about, how both of us were classically trained scientists, and we've had these experiences that don't fit within that paradigm, and how we had to adjust our thinking, and how, this stuff does exist, and you have to get around it. Science isn't the be-all and end-all. It was refreshing to speak to, as far as scientists goes, he's leaps and bounds above me. But it was nice to actually talk with somebody who has had that same experience in their life. Yeah, he was very candid. It's like he probably one of the least guarded. I mean, I loved his answers. They were, if he knew, he gave you the details. If he didn't know, I don't know. It's like he was a very refreshing character to listen to.
You know what? I appreciated having him along for the ride as well. And, like I was saying before you connected, I'm not sure if you heard, when I asked him point blank a question that I've been waiting 2 years to ask him about what Neil Armstrong said on the emergency channel, where he said, they are here, they are on the crater, and they are watching us. I mean, if you don't get goosebumps over something like that, it makes me question what you believe or what you don't believe. Now, granted, he did not hear it as firsthand information. Someone that he knew told him that. But when it comes to a whistleblower, we always look for proof. We always want that hardcore evidence. But when a guy like Ken, who's been there and is talking about these topics on a nightly basis, on a daily basis, I mean, this is his life. And when he is talking about these situations, we have to take him there. He was in the rooms. He knew the astronauts. He was able to communicate with people above him and below him because that was his job. And whether or not, we have guests on this show that I will never say whether or not I believe or not, because in the end we try and run it right down the middle the way journalism is supposed to be done. And my opinion on whether or not I believe him is irrelevant. That's for you, the audience, to decide in your own opinion. But this one, I can honestly say, I believe him. I absolutely believe everything he said. Call me naive, call me silly, that's okay. I'm okay with that. He has no reason to lie. And we could say, well,
exactly.
We could sit here and say, preacher, that we are, well, he's selling a book and he's got a website and he's promoting himself. We can take all those excuses. But in the end, we can do that with every whistleblower out there, from Edward Snowden on down. Here's a guy just saying, look, this is what I know. This is what I believe. This is what I was told would happen. And it's up to you whether or not you want to believe it.
His credibility just seems to he exudes credibility. I don't know about, I guess what you're saying, I'm sort of a natural skeptic, and, holding people like that at arm's length. And from the first time he and I talked on Facebook, I could tell he was a no BS type person. I was very impressed with him from the very start.
I was too. And one of the things that I really, really liked about him was when he opened up and said if he didn't have the answer, he said, I don't know. Is it possible? Absolutely. But the one thing that I like about him is he hasn't stopped learning. And the more he's learned, like he said about the secret space program, if you recall that comment, where he said when he was working for NASA, he didn't believe it. But now, when he looks at everything that has happened technologically, why we haven't gone back to the moon, he says, yeah, it's darn well possible, because the technology is there.
That was something refreshing in that he wasn't afraid to dabble in some speculation. I mean, most guests we have in that field, if they're as candid as Ken is, they stay strictly to their rigid set of facts, which is good. But he was willing to toss some thoughts out there based on his experience. And I thought that was quite refreshing.
I thought it was quite refreshing as well. One of the things, Eric, that I really liked about him, and yeah, maybe I'm gushing a little bit here, okay, because I waited 2 years for that interview. But one of the things I really enjoyed was when he was talking about whether or not we were told, and we as a human society were told not to go back. I believe that was Apollo 17, if I'm correct. And when
don't come back, you're not ready.
Exactly. That to me really, really makes me understand why we never go back. To me, that is probably one of two plausible answers. Maybe we were told not to go back. That to me seems very, very truthful. But the other side is, if we already have a secret space program where there are bases up there, and there are bases on the Mars, and there's bases on other Terra Nova up in space, Venus, Saturn's moons, etc., then there's no need to have a program anymore. There's just no need.
NASA becomes more of a public relations or soft disclosure mechanism than an exploration mechanism. It doesn't really have the same function that it did in the 60s when we were just pioneering space travel.
Question for
and he
you.
brought up a good point about that. Well, when he was saying, the people that believe that the moon landings were fake, filmed by Stanley Kubrick, he brought up a very good point. The money that was spent to hoax it, in just what we can verify, employees of Grumman, employees of Lockheed Martin, all these government employees that were hired to get the job done, and then found themselves on the unemployment line when it was accomplished, when the plug was pulled. That's very compelling evidence that we went there.
Well, not just that, but when he also stated in regards to that he believed that the filming of the landings were also done in case of disaster or in case of a public relations issue. And here, I never really thought about it that way, because to me it was one or the other. Either we put our foot on the moon, as history tells us, or it was filmed and hoaxed and we never went to the moon. I never thought of the in-between element of that, which is, what if there was a disaster and we needed to grab that tape? Or let's say the tape's burned up and we want to show the public for a public relations, priority, we need something. So I never thought about that. Did you ever think about that?
Well, when I first started getting into this moon, because I had a patient, 10 years ago, who did not, they were a husband and wife, they were in the same room at the same time. I was drawing a sample on both. The husband did not believe that the moon landings were real, that they was fake, and his wife in the next bed was a firm believer, and it was kind of interesting to get both of those. But to answer your question, that started making me think. And, not just the disaster aspect, but what if we get there and, ET's not content to show up in a visor? Maybe, they could have, descended on us en masse, taken us somewhere, if the extraterrestrial presence had not been willing to stay out of the picture, and they didn't want to disclose that, you'd have to have these backup films to keep the ET presence unknown as a damage control measure.
Do you think, though, that maybe space was finally understood that it was a waste of money? And the reason why I say that, yes, we have satellites, trillions of dollars worth of satellites flying through the sky in the night every single day and night. But on the flip side, I'm talking the space program. Do you think it was maybe a waste of money? Because, let's face it, like Eric says at #SpacedOutRadio, there's still a lot we don't know about our own planet. Less than 5% of the ocean has been researched. We can't create a technology to get to the deepest depths of our ocean. And I'm wondering, do you think maybe we all looked at that and said, well, maybe we should concentrate on what's here rather than in the far and beyond?
I think the answer to that is more complicated. We go by what Dr. Johnston said. We were told, don't come back, you're not ready. You've got this, basic mandate from a technologically advanced race saying, stay home. So, yeah, I think in a way, NASA's space exploration beyond, the orbital stuff was a waste of money, because what are we going to do? Start throwing hardware up there and they're going to start shooting it down or make things unpleasant? Some people think they already did. So, yeah, I think there's a redirection. I don't think it was handled well. Maybe NASA should have gotten more involved with terrestrial exploration, changed its mandate a little bit. But there's some validity in that thought. There really is. Proxmire was no fan of NASA's. Matter of fact, I remember that was a verb at one time. Something had been proxmired. It was considered a waste of money back in the 70s. and he was definitely not a fan of space exploration.
What was your thoughts on what Ken Johnston was saying about the Van Allen belt? That when you're traveling at 17,000 miles a minute, that you maybe get as much radiation as you do when you go to the dentist and take an x-ray. What was your thoughts on that?
I love that because I have been hearing all the debunkers saying, oh, we can't do this or we can't do that because if you go through the, they essentially make it sound like going through the Van Allen belt would be sitting in a microwave oven. And to hear him very calmly and very exactly explain, because it's obvious he knows what the radiation levels are because of what he did for a living, and knows that going through that at the speed we're going through, plus I believe there's some rotation going on too. With the, I'd have to back, I would ask him, but if the ship is also rotating, the radiation doesn't settle in one spot. But yeah, it doesn't sound like I love that. It was like, aha, from the horse's mouth, the Van Allen belt theory is garbage. I love that.
Karen, who is the media relations for both Ken and for Brett Shepard, who will be on the show on March 29th, has said, Brett said the not ready yet comment from the extraterrestrials, which we were apparently told, was because we wanted space-based weapons, and they would not allow it.
Yeah, I have heard that we've still got... that's one of those things. It's easy to put something like, no, we don't have space-based weapons. We're keeping space free of that. And then you hear that China's got a laser up there zapping old satellites. That's something none of us terrestrial people, unless we've got a 30-inch telescope, are really going to be able to verify or debunk. And I could see that period in our history, the wars that were going on, both the Cold War and the war in Vietnam and all the unrest, I can see why they would say, look at that and say, hey, you ain't coming to our neighborhood. Just stay in your own sandbox. We're not, by and large, I would not think we'd be looked on as a very desirable set of neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Our current.
No, for sure. And, that's something that we also got to play. I mean, the first thing that us humans seem to always look at is when we find a new toy or a new area for exploration, the first thing we think of is how do we militarize it?
Right.
And I'm not trying to turn this into a big peace love in here, okay? Nor am I, a hippie or anything along those lines. But, I mean, it does get old. It does get old, but it does make sense. Because we have to rewind 50 years and realize that during that time, the Cold War was in full force. Nuclear war could break out at any second. We're just a few years removed from the Cuban Missile Crisis. Some of us aren't even born yet, like me. We have to look at all of this information and realize that when we're trying to put a 2017 perspective on something that happened in the mid to late 60s and into the 70s, there is a totally different wavelength on the way you have to look at it, at least in my opinion. So I can see where the U.S. would want to maybe try and weaponize or colonize or put some sort of military base up there. It makes sense to me. It also makes sense to me with the ETs saying, yeah, we're not going to play that game up here. You brand new humans are a little too dangerous. And for Eric at hashtag Space Out Radio, I'm paraphrasing, not quoting here. So, anyhow, what do you think about that? Do you think that we are trying to, solve things on a 2017 mind And are we failing to understand what was happening 50 years ago?
Oh, I think absolutely, because it's hard to explain growing up in that era to somebody, say my daughter's generation, somebody in their 20s, trying to explain to them, the context of what we lived through. And in a way, I think it's good that that's dying out, that that mindset is starting to go extinct with my generation. And maybe the kids coming up, they have their faults, but I think they're more open-minded and will be more flexible in spirit when it comes to when full disclosure comes. I think they're going to be better prepared for it than a lot of people in my generation or generation behind me. I think that there's going to be, I don't know, I feel like that I can't get over feeling like something is going to happen soon.
Are you talking disclosure?
Disclosure, just sort of, not just disclosure. I almost feel like, I don't know, I almost feel like we're on the cusp of a evolutionary jump, or just some kind of paradigm shift is coming. And I don't know how to put it any better than that. It's just a feeling that I get, and over the years, I've had these weird little feelings, and I've learned to pay attention to them. And I feel like something stirring. But I can't be any more specific than that.
I don't know if I agree with that. I really don't. I don't feel any different that I did yesterday or the day before. And you've heard me, and we've gotten into this debate on the air a few times about whether or not disclosure is going to happen anytime soon. I have no problem going on record that I don't see it happening. I really don't see it happening, because there is way too much going on, that if all the rumors, the conspiracies, the stories, the folklore are true, starting from President Eisenhower on up 70 years, I'll tell you right now, as an experiencer, as someone who has been taken, as someone who has a wife who's taken, I'd sue. If I found out the government knew about it, I'd sue. And if literally it's millions of Americans, and maybe hundreds of thousands, if not maybe 1 million or 2 Canadians, then I would absolutely be suing my government. Couldn't sue yours, but I could sue my government if they knew about it. Sure as hell I would. Right?
And all the government has to do is declare victory and say, sorry, but, we're not, we could sue all we wanted, but, when you're suing the government, all they have to do to squash it is say, no, we're not going there. And I think I do believe that they are prepared to tell everybody that, tough luck, this is the way it was. We're not going to be held responsible. But I agree that there's a lot of people that are going to, look at the people that got their character just defamed and vilified because they came out on this subject. The slanders of the late Jesse Marcel and his, I believe his son is dead now too, Jesse Marcel Jr. If anybody would have a case against the government, I believe it would have been those two. But I don't think that the lawsuit aspect is going to hold it back, because one, I don't think the governments are not the ones that are going to be in charge of disclosure. I just feel like it's going to happen despite them, not because of them. A lot of like what Dr. Johnston was saying, where, you know, you don't land on the White House lawn, you disclose, you know, like you've had your experiences, you know, all these different individuals that know. I mean, you've seen the craft, you know. I've seen what I think were craft in the air, so I'm still, you know, I want to think, yes, that's what they were, but still, you know, I haven't had the same kind of concrete, feet on the ground, oh my God, it's 200 yards in front of me type experience that you have. I mean, you know, I have faith that it's true. You have, you know, hardcore belief. I mean, you've seen it first, you know, right on there firsthand. And it's people like you. I mean, disclosure came for you. And anybody that knows you and knows, you know, you're not a BSer, it's come to us. Disclosure has come to me through you. And I think if you magnify that by all the people that have been you know, all the experiencers, disclosure is spreading kind of like a flu bug, you know, to put it in epidemiological terms, you know, it's being disseminated. And it just takes people of the kind of character that you would believe telling their friends, hey, this is what I saw. It's out there, and I think it's going to reach a critical mass to the point where it's not going to take government disclosure because it's already a widespread belief.
Hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Eric says, radio shows have been saying disclosure is going to happen or something catastrophic is going to happen since the late 90s. It's that fear-mongering crap that I hate. That's why we don't do it around here. But the whole point is, as we're talking disclosure, yes, you can have a soft disclosure in regards to, you know, people having their own experiences, them learning what is going on within their own lives. People are going to believe one by one. However, for the majority of people who have not had an experience or don't believe that they've had an experience, Eric, yes, we've seen countries, smaller countries, Bolivia, Brazil, and a few others come out and say, this is what we know about unidentified flying objects, this is our disclosure. But until the big guys come out to play, we're playing with the fishies when we want to catch sharks and whales. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
yeah, I do.
Okay, and the fact is, whether or not you want to like it or not, as an American that you are, and the majority of our audience is, okay, you're not going to believe it until your government comes out and says it. And the rest of the world is going to follow suit. Okay, Canada will never disclose. We could be a disclosure country. A lot of people trust us on this planet. We could do it, but what's the end result? What's the repercussions of our American neighbors? Because as close as we are, it would take something like that to kind of ruin the entire process and the entire relationship. Add to the fact that we don't have a public, or we have a majority of a public who does not believe that this is real. They do not believe. Yes, they may believe that there is life on other planets, but they don't believe that we've been visited. So what I'm getting at here is until we start putting the pressure on, and even with that pressure, I do not believe for a second that any of the big four countries, Britain, Russia, China, the United States, and if you want to add a 4.5, we can throw Japan in there. Okay? I don't think if any of those 5 countries open up and tell us what is going on, that disclosure will never happen. There's too much to lose. Could you imagine Way too much to lose.
I'm not sure that the losses wouldn't. Okay, once I'm thinking on a technological level, once we have disclosure, just something's going on with the oil market. You have the Saudis who have been staunch, keep the price up, saying we're not, we're going to pump out as much as we can, as fast as we can, and make. It's almost like that change is on the wind, and they know it. They're trying to make as much money with oil, pump as much out as they can, because it's like they see something coming that's going to make oil less. It's going to be more for plastics and lubricant, and less for fuel. I think there's more to gain by disclosure than we're going to lose.
Of course, there is more to gain, because it opens us up not to just a worldly event that, in as I've said on this show many a times, will be the second biggest story in mankind's history, next to Jesus Christ himself coming down from the heavens. But it opens us up to the entire universe. Space travel. Maybe we get to go places. Probably your generation and my generation won't. But I look at my daughters and my son, and I think, what would they be able to explore? Would they have the opportunity to go to Titan? Would they have the opportunity to go into a different universe, to planets there? There's so much that could open this up to a truly, no pun intended, universal lifestyle. It could be beautiful. It could be really beautiful. But on the flip side, when we are controlled by what a government tells us, we're losing. We are losing. And in the end, I'm not trying to, I'm going way too Canadian here, my friend. Way too, But on the flip, I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'll get to my point, we will not be able to take that chance, because if the government, say, comes out and says, we've known about this for 70 years, since before Roswell, that's a lot of egg on their faces. That's a lot of egg on a lot of people's faces throughout history. It rewrites the history books. It rewrites religion. It rewrites the entire purpose, not only of life, but what's the point of going to work? What's the point of being a daily slave for $1? It rewrites everything. And I don't think society is ready to give up everything. Well, maybe work. I would give up work in a heartbeat. But I sure as heck would or could possibly see what everything that could transpire, that it could happen, if that makes any sense.
I feel that you're talking. I agree. We've got this entrenched bureaucracy and this ruling class, this whole lifestyle that's, from cradle to grave type. That's why I believe that it's going to take ET telling these earthly governments, get ready. You're not going to keep, the show is about to come to a stop. We're not going to wait on you. I mean, the system, the way it is right now, unless it is acted upon by an outside force, it's never going to change. And I think that you would have to have an ET, an ET civilization or ruling, what they call it, the Council 12. Anyhow, it's going to take an outside, like Dr. Johnston said, these people saying, enough's enough. We've been more than patient. It's time to, move on from this. I think we're stuck in it feels like a flywheel effect. It's a system, the way the world is right now, that it can't break out unless something from outside would have to change the parameters. It's just too self-sustaining. And I feel like that's coming. I think the soft disclosure is just to get some of the, more primitive mindset people ready. And I think there is going to be some upheaval and some turmoil when it comes, but it's got to happen.
Well,
the way it is right now, unless a meteor strikes the Earth, the system as it is now is just going to keep going.
I get you, then it has to happen. And I will not disagree with you at all about that one. But think about it for a second. How many lives will this cost? How many lives will this cost? That's what scares me. Because if all of this type of daily lifestyle that we live, Eric, okay, getting up for work, following the law, following your church, following the Word of God, following whatever you believe, we all live by rules. And all of a sudden, we've been told for centuries that people are woo-woo, to quote Thomas Seawood's word, if they believe in any of this stuff that we talk about. Okay? We sit there and we look at it. Okay? Now, if it didn't matter, who's to say that people, and I'm not trying to fearmonger here, but let's just be hypothetical for a couple of minutes. Who's to say that people don't start taking the law into their own hands? Oh, I don't like you. Boom, gone. Well, what's the difference? Aliens are here anyways. They're going to come take over the planet. We see what Hollywood has done with aliens over the last number of years. Never really a good movie over the last 10 years that shows aliens in a very good light. And when we look at all these topics, how many lives will this cost? Because there's going to be, you look at some of these religious cults who will say, well, that's the end of the world, time to die out. How many people do they take with them? How many people just lose it because they can't handle the reality? They can't handle the idea that religion is man-made. They can't handle the idea that no longer do I have to pay a mortgage because it doesn't matter. No longer do I need to pay my bills. I think disclosure on the immediacy would cause absolute chaos and anarchy. And I could see it happening. I could totally see it happening. And the more the elites, the government officials hold us down with taxes, and they hold us down with telling us that if we don't work, we're worthless. The bank's holding us down with interest and other fees that we can't live our life, that keeps us slaves to the grind. And then all of a sudden throw the aliens in there, that they're coming down, good or bad, doesn't matter, they're coming, with some sort of disclosure. That is dangerous. That is dangerous. You look how and I'll throw out another what if out there, and this is more of truth, but you look at how we pick fights with each other. How the hell do the United States and Russia always seem to clash? Okay, yet here they are sharing beers on the International Space Station, and America can't get into space without the use of the Russian fleet. Does that
makes
not
it seem like a puppet show, doesn't it?
It does. That doesn't make sense to me. How could we be pissed off at Russia? Okay, yes, they invaded the Crimea for no reason. And me being Ukrainian, I shake a fist at them because that's about as strong as we are as Ukrainians. And Mike Morin from the Canadian Paranormal Society sitting right beside me, he nodded his head because he's Ukrainian too. Yeah, we're picking on the Ukrainians here. Right? But the whole point is, we can't even get our crap together on this planet. We're picking fights for no reason. We're invading countries for no reason. Example, creating ISIS. Example, weapons of mass destruction, if anybody's forgotten that one. And now we throw aliens into the mix? I think it would doom us. It would doom us.
Okay, I'm going to phrase this as carefully as I can. Okay, let me take devil's advocate here so I don't have to couch my words. All right. Maybe we need a shakeup and a purging of the old mindset. I'm not saying that's what I want to see happen. I don't. I like my house. I like my yard. And, I even love my regular job. But what if the only way forward is to have a upheaval? Maybe it does take the panic. There's the people that aren't going to panic. Not all of those are going to get wiped out. And maybe it's a way of thinning the herd. Like I said, I'm not advocating that before everybody gets all upset. I'm just saying maybe what we fear about disclosure is a necessary step that civilizations have been going through for, billions of years. I mean, looking at the Vedic texts, it's almost like it's been tried before. And it's like we get to a point, disclosure comes, we destroy ourselves. You know what I'm saying. Maybe it's just a step. It might be it might be a painful step, a tragic step. But what if that is what is required to move on, to evolve as a species or a planet?
I don't know, my friend.
I would not like to see that happen, but if the price, I guess I'm saying, if the price for evolution is we have to go through that upheaval, it might be worth it in the long run.
It could be, but I like the comment that at hashtag Spaced Out Radio by Eric that he makes. And he says, we can all have all of that without a money system, Eric. We are brainwashed by the elites, I'll add by the elites and government officials, that we need money. And the funny part about it is, you talk to any of these people who have had a lot of ET experience, it seems like a lot of these aliens have no clue what dollar amount is. Our Keith Andrews has a very good point on that when Dan the Pleiadian and his friends went to the Experiencers Conference, or showed up at the Experiencers Conference in Portland, Maine. And they just handed the person at the door a bunch of money and said, you figure it out, because they couldn't count. They didn't understand monetary value. Yet, I have a daughter sitting right behind me, drinking a Pepsi, wearing Under Armour clothing instead of just a plain Jane hoodie, which costs money. because we need money. We're sold on product. We're sold on advertisement. We're sold that it's bigger, better. Go get it. My God, Mike Morin beside me is wearing Lululemon. What man does that?
A comfortable one.
You know what?
I heard that.
Speaking of that, I got to change topics here. Everett Themer from the Encounter Online, and Everett, I am going there because there's been over 150, 160 comments about my post today. He's in his mid-40s, and he's a Barry Manilow fan. To me, when I think about that, that means he probably likes Michael Bolton, Kenny G, Coldplay, Celine Dion. Probably strums a few notes of Nickelback on his guitar as well. At what point do you have to say, Eric, I need your man card? At what point do you say, we need to have a serious talk? At what point do you say, your Playboy subscription is coming to a close?
Well,
I need some help here, buddy, because Themer and his friends, he's got, I swear to goodness, man, if you read the comments on my Facebook page, today's Thought of the Dave, I noticed a play on words there. I went a little punny. Okay? It's like 50-50 down the road. All the women are like, oh, he's so sensitive. I bet you he wears flowers in his hair. There's even men saying that.
Well, dang.
I know.
You got me there, because I'll go from jamming something that has to be tuned down and on a 7-string to be played correctly because it's real heavy, like thrash metal, to, my favorite piece of music in the entire world is Marriage of Figaro by Mozart.
Well, that's different.
I've owned an ABBA record, so I'm not sure where to fall on that one.
My friend, I had a Huey Lewis and a Samantha Fox album back in the day. And
my goodness.
And I could tell you the reason why I had a Samantha Fox album, because my best friend at 12 years old heard a rumor on the radio that said that there were naked pictures of Samantha Fox inside her album. So I went and bought one. I saved up $18 as a 12-year-old to go buy a Samantha Fox album.
And guess what?
Yeah, exactly. You know how hurt I was over that?
Oh, goodness. And there was no eBay to get rid of it all.
No, nothing. It was painful.
Music is such a weird thing because, anybody that knows me personally knows that I've got a very vulgar sense of humor. And not, there's almost nowhere I won't go if I think it's funny. But in music, I don't like vulgarity.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, music is one of those things that's like a key lock type for everybody.
Uh-huh.
And it's really hard to,
Bill Cardwell.
It's hard to qualify it.
Bill Cardwell says, I am right, and he posts a picture of Samantha Fox. Coming up large, Bill Cardwell. That makes up for that horrific password you said. Oh, yeah. Hey, Eric, you hold on. I got to wrap this thing up. If you're listening in on the Spaced Out Radio side, like WQEE 99 Rock the Key and the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans, you're listening to Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL. Little brother is watching. Bumblefoot brings us in and takes us out of every single show here on Spaced Out Radio. Everett, you need some Rammstein, according to Eric at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Anyhow, Du hast, my friend. Du hast mich. Anyways, Bumblefoot brings us in and takes us home every single night on this show. I will be back on Monday talking with a new feature that we have on this show called The Reporters. We're breaking it down. We'll tell you more about that on Monday. My bag is packed. Uncle Jimbo, James Tyson, and Spaced Out Weekend with Elizabeth Anglin are coming on in Saturday and Sunday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. Make sure you check out our website this weekend because it's going to be a good weekend. We're adding more content. And don't forget, check us out at patreon.com. Become a Spaced Out Radio patron today. Thank you so much to Ken Johnston for being our guest in the first 2 hours, teaching us about NASA. He'll be back on this show on May 23rd. I'm your host, Dave Scott. I am out of here for the weekend. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home.